The night was cold, cruel, and quiet. Snow kept falling from the dark sky, covering everything under a white blanket. The wind howled through the tall frozen trees, carrying the sound of cracking branches and the soft cry of wild animals searching for shelter. Far from the city lights, a small wooden cabin stood alone near the edge of the forest. Smoke rose from its chimney, curling upward into the freezing air. Inside, a man sat near the fire, sharpening his old axe. His name was Eli Thorn, a woodcutter who had lived alone for many years. His hands were rough, his face tired, and his eyes empty. Once Eli had a family, a wife and a daughter. But both were gone now, lost to a mining accident that took everything he loved. Since then, he spoke little, worked alone, and trusted no one. The world beyond his cabin didn't matter anymore. Only the woods, the snow, and the sound of his own breath. That night, however, something strange happened. As Eli placed another log on the fire, he heard a faint sound outside, like a small tap, then another. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was just a branch knocking against the window, but the sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. Eli frowned. No one ever came this far out in the storm. He stood, grabbed his lantern, and moved toward the door. The cold wind hissed through the cracks of the walls. When he opened the door, the icy wind rushed in, biting his face. At first, he saw nothing, only endless snow and swirling fog. Then his eyes caught movement, two small shapes in the storm. They were standing just beyond his doorstep, shivering violently. Eli stepped forward. His boots sank into the snow. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice almost lost in the wind. The two shapes moved closer, and then he saw them clearly. They were children, but not human. Their skin was pale blue, their eyes large and glowing softly like tiny lights in the dark. Their hair was thin and white, covered with frost. They wore ragged clothes made of strange fabric, torn and wet. One of them, perhaps a boy, was barely standing, while the other, a small girl, was trying to hold him up. Eli froze. He had heard stories about them. Alien settlers who came after the war, now scattered across planets, feared by humans and hunted by soldiers. Some said they were dangerous. Others said they were peaceful. Eli never cared to find out. Until now, the girl looked up at him, her lips trembling. "Please," she whispered in broken words. "Please, warmth." Eli's heart beat faster. He looked around, no signs of anyone else. Could this be a trick, a trap? Maybe soldiers were nearby, waiting for him to make a mistake. But when the boy suddenly collapsed into the snow, Eli's doubt disappeared. He rushed forward, lifted the boy in his arms, and motioned for the girl to follow. They were freezing. Their skin felt like ice. He carried them inside quickly and shut the door behind him. The warmth of the fire filled the small cabin. The girl guided her brother to the fire's edge and tried to warm his hands. Eli grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around them both. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the crackling of burning wood. Slowly, color began to return to their faces. Eli poured them a bit of warm broth from his pot. The girl hesitated before tasting it. Then she nodded and helped her brother drink. They ate carefully, afraid to take too much. "Where are your parents?" Eli asked softly. The girl lowered her head. "Gone." Her voice was small. "Taken," Eli frowned. "Taken by who?" But she didn't answer. She just looked at her brother, who was now asleep beside the fire. Outside, the wind screamed again, louder this time. Eli stood by the window, staring into the darkness. He thought he saw faint lights far away, moving lights. Perhaps torches or machines. He wasn't sure. When he turned back, the girl was watching him with her glowing eyes. She looked scared, but also trusting. He sighed deeply. "You can stay here tonight," he said, "until the storm ends." The girl nodded, her small hand clutching the blanket tighter. Eli sat back down near the fire, his axe beside him. He tried to close his eyes, but his mind wouldn't rest. Who were these children? Why were they alone in the forest? And who had taken their parents? As the night grew darker, the cabin became silent again. The twins slept peacefully near the fire, but Eli couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was out there searching. He didn't know it yet. But this night, the night two alien children knocked on his door, would change everything, because beyond the forest, hidden in the storm, red lights blinked in the distance. Machines moved slowly through the snow, scanning, searching, and their scanners had already found a trace of warmth coming from a lonely cabin deep in the woods. Morning came slowly. The storm had stopped, but the world outside was still white and frozen. The sun tried to shine through thick clouds, casting a pale light over the quiet forest. Smoke still rose from Eli Thorn's chimney, curling into the gray sky. Inside the cabin, the fire was burning low. Eli sat on his wooden chair, staring into the flames, lost in thought. He hadn't slept much. The faces of the two alien children stayed in his mind. Their frightened eyes, their thin arms, the way the little girl had begged for warmth. He looked over to them. The boy was still asleep, breathing weakly, his small body wrapped in a blanket. The girl sat beside him, her knees pulled to her chest. She was awake and watching Eli carefully, as if unsure whether to trust him or run. Eli spoke softly. "You're safe here. I won't hurt you." The girl hesitated, then nodded slowly. Her voice was quiet, broken, but full of fear. "Thank you." "Human, what's your name?" Eli asked. "Lyra," she whispered. "My brother?" "Kale." Eli nodded. "You both were lucky to find this place before the storm got worse." Lyra didn't answer. She just stared at her brother and brushed the snow from his hair. When Eli brought them some bread and stew, she hesitated before tasting it. After one small bite, she realized it was safe and began to eat carefully, sharing with Kale when he woke. Eli noticed something then. Strange symbols burned into their wrists. Deep marks like brands. He frowned. "What happened to your arms?" Lyra pulled her sleeve down quickly, hiding the mark. "Bad people," she said simply. "They took us to make us something we don't want to be." Eli didn't understand. "Make you what?" Before Lyra could answer, a sudden noise broke the silence. Crack, hiss. Eli froze. The sound came from his old radio sitting on the shelf. It had been dead for months. Now it was alive, spitting static. Then a cold metallic voice came through. "Attention. Attention all sectors. 2 alien fugitives have escaped from the Epsilon research base, classified as dangerous. Anyone found aiding them will face full punishment under galactic law." Eli's heart began to pound. He turned toward Lyra. Her face had gone pale. She gripped Kale's hand tightly. He spoke carefully. "That message. Is it about you?" Tears welled in her glowing eyes. "We are not bad," she whispered. "They made us. We didn't ask for it. We just want to live." Eli looked at the radio again. The message repeated, louder this time, echoing through the small cabin. He turned it off quickly, his mind racing. He had heard about these things before. Secret labs, soldiers, experiments. But seeing it in front of him was different. He paced the room, confused and angry. "If they find you here, they'll come for me too." Lyra stood, trembling. "We can go. We will not bring you trouble." Eli stared at the little girl standing in the middle of his cabin, shivering, trying to protect her brother even though she was terrified. Something deep inside him twisted. For a moment he saw his own daughter, her small frame, her frightened eyes the day she died. He sighed heavily. "No, you're not going anywhere." "Not yet." Lyra looked up at him in shock. "You'll help us?" "I don't know what I can do," Eli said quietly, "but I won't hand you over." "Not to them." Before Lyra could speak, a faint rumble shook the ground. The glass of the window rattled. Eli ran to the window and peered outside. Through the drifting snow, he saw faint shapes moving, dark, tall, mechanical. Searchlights swept across the trees. He cursed under his breath. "They're coming," he said. "They must have tracked your heat signal." Lyra ran to her brother and tried to wake him fully.
"Kyle, we must hide."
Eli quickly opened a small wooden hatch under the floor, an old storage space he once used for tools. "Down there," he said. "Quiet, don't make a sound." Lyra hesitated, her glowing eyes full of fear. "What about you?" "I'll handle them," Eli said firmly. "Now go." The twins crawled inside the dark space, clutching each other. Eli closed the hatch and threw a rug over it just as heavy footsteps echoed outside. Then came the pounding on the door. Bang, bang. "Bang, open up!" a voice commanded. "This is Galactic Enforcement. We're searching for escaped subjects. You will comply or be terminated." Eli's hand tightened on his axe. He took a deep breath and opened the door. Outside stood 5 armored soldiers. Their armor gleamed black under the gray light. Behind them, a hovercraft floated, humming with power. The leader, a tall alien with silver eyes, stepped forward. "We're looking for 2 fugitives," he said coldly. "Small, possibly wounded. They were last seen in this area." Eli met his gaze without fear. "No one's here but me," he said. "Haven't seen a soul in days." The commander's silver eyes scanned the cabin behind him. "We'll see about that. The soldiers pushed past Eli and began searching under the bed, behind crates, even inside the cupboard. Eli stood silently, his jaw tight, praying they wouldn't find the hatch. Finally, after several tense minutes, the commander turned back. "If you are lying," he said softly, "you'll regret it." Eli didn't reply. He just stared back, silent and unmoving. The soldiers left, their boots crunching on the snow as they disappeared into the fog. Eli waited until the sound faded completely. Then slowly, he lifted the rug and opened the hatch. 2 pairs of glowing eyes looked up at him. "It's over," he said softly. For now. The twins climbed out, shaking. Lyra ran to him and hugged his leg tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. Eli looked down at the small alien girl clinging to him and knew his quiet life was gone. He had just become a protector again. And outside, in the cold distance, red lights flickered once more. The hunt had only begun. Night came again, heavier than before. The forest was silent, as if holding its breath. A full moon rose above the frozen trees, lighting the snow-covered ground with a pale glow. Eli Thorn sat near the fire, sharpening his axe slowly. Every sound outside made him tense. The 2 alien children, Lyra and Kyle, slept close together under a blanket near the fire. Their breathing was soft but uneven. They had been trembling in their sleep, whispering in their strange language. Eli didn't understand their words, but he could feel the fear in them. He kept glancing at the window. The wind blew softly, but he felt watched. Somewhere out there, he knew the soldiers were still searching. They never gave up on their property. When the fire crackled, Lyra woke suddenly, gasping. Her glowing eyes darted around the room before she realized she was safe. Eli handed her a cup of warm water. "Bad dream?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "They take children. Make them fight. Make them hurt others." Her small voice shook. "They said Kale and I are not allowed to feel. Not allowed to love." Eli's jaw tightened. "They told you that?" She nodded again, tears shining in her eyes. "We ran away. They will never stop looking." Eli looked at her, at the tiny child who had seen more pain than most grown soldiers. "They'll have to get through me first," he said quietly. Before Lyra could reply, the sound came. Deep, mechanical, growing louder each second. The ground trembled. A bright beam of light swept across the snow outside, shining through the cracks in the wooden walls. Eli's heart dropped. "They're here." He grabbed his axe and blew out the lantern. The cabin went dark except for the faint orange glow of the fire. Under the floor. "Now," he whispered. Lyra shook Kale awake and guided him to the wooden hatch. They crawled inside just as the pounding began on the door. Bang, bang.
Bang! Open up!
"Galactic Enforcement," a voice shouted.
We have orders to search this property.
Eli took a deep breath and opened the door slowly. Outside, 6 armored soldiers stood in a line, their black suits reflecting the moonlight. The commander, the same tall alien with silver eyes, stepped forward. His voice was sharp and cold. "You were warned, human. Step aside." Eli stood in the doorway, blocking their view. "You already searched once. There's nothing here." The commander's thin lips curved into a cruel smile. "We didn't ask for your permission." He motioned to his soldiers. "Search everything." They marched inside, their heavy boots thudding on the wooden floor. One of them kicked over a chair. Another tore down the curtains. They opened every cupboard, every drawer. Eli stayed calm, but his heart raced. He could almost hear Lyra and Kale breathing beneath the floorboards. The commander circled him slowly. "Strange," he said. "You live alone, yet there are 2 small sets of footprints outside your cabin." Eli met his cold gaze. "I rescue strays sometimes. Maybe a wild pet came by." The commander stepped closer, inches from his face. "We both know that's a lie." Eli's grip tightened on the handle of his axe. "And if it is?" For a moment, no one moved. The firelight flickered between them. Then the commander gave a small nod. "You humans never learn, always protecting what doesn't belong to you." He turned to leave, but before stepping out, he looked back. "If we find those children anywhere near this sector, your name will be erased from every record. No one will remember you ever existed." The soldiers followed him outside. The door closed. Their footsteps faded into the storm. Eli stood frozen, listening until the sound was gone. Then he knelt down and lifted the rug. "It's over," he whispered. Lyra and Kale crawled out, shaking. Kale clung to his sister, hiding his face in her shoulder. Lyra looked up at Eli. "They know?" she said quietly. They will come again, Eli nodded. I know. That's why we're leaving before dawn. He began to pack quickly, food, blankets, his axe, and a small old rifle he hadn't touched in years. Lyra helped even though her small hands trembled. When she looked out the window, her eyes widened. They left a machine, she said softly. Eli rushed over. At the edge of the trees, something blinked red. A drone hovering low, watching. They planted a tracker, he muttered. They want to see where we go. Lyra looked at him with worry. Then what will we do? Eli opened the door and stepped out into the freezing night. Snow crunched under his boots as he approached the blinking drone. He raised his axe high and brought it down with all his strength. The machine sparked and died. He turned back to the cabin. Now, he said, his voice firm, we run. Inside, Lyra held Cale close, her small heart pounding. She looked back at the dying drone through the window and whispered, Thank you, human. That night, as they packed to leave, none of them knew that the act of saving two lost children would soon ignite a storm that reached far beyond the forest, a storm that would change how the entire galaxy saw humanity. The sun never truly rose that morning. A gray mist covered the forest, wrapping the trees in cold silence. Eli Thorn tightened the straps on his old backpack and looked at the two small figures beside him. Lyra and Cale stood near the cabin door, wrapped in heavy blankets that were far too big for them. Their glowing blue skin flickered faintly under the weak light, and their eyes looked tired but ready. Eli checked the forest one last time. The drone was gone, but the tracks left by soldiers were still fresh in the snow. We can't stay, he said. They'll come back with more men. Lyra nodded quietly, holding her brother's hand. Kyle leaned against her, weak from exhaustion. His breathing was shallow, his small body still trembling from the cold. Eli picked up his axe and opened the cabin door. Stay close. No sound, no light. They stepped into the white silence. Snow crunched softly beneath their boots as they walked deeper into the woods. The trees grew denser, tall and dark like giants standing guard. Every branch carried heavy frost that glittered like glass. For hours they walked. No one spoke. Lyra kept looking back, afraid the soldiers might appear again. Eli could see her fear, but he also saw something else, strength. She moved carefully, helping her brother whenever he stumbled, whispering soft words to keep him calm. After a while, the forest began to change. Strange symbols were carved into the trees, old marks that glowed faintly blue. Eli stopped and frowned. What are those? Lyra touched one of the glowing marks with her small hand. They are ancient signs, she said softly. Made by my people long ago. They show safe paths, Eli nodded. Then we follow them. But the journey was not easy. The snow grew deeper and the cold became sharper. Kyle began coughing again, his small chest shaking. Eli knelt down and lifted him into his arms. You rest now, little one, he said. I'll carry you. Kyle blinked weakly. You human? He asked in his soft voice. Eli smiled faintly. Yes, and you're safe with me. They kept moving until they reached an old ruin hidden in the forest. It looked like the remains of an ancient temple, half buried under ice. Stone walls were broken and strange alien letters glowed faintly along the arches. A broken statue stood at the center, its face worn by time. Eli led them inside. The air was still and dry, and it offered shelter from the wind. We'll rest here, he said. He started a small fire with what little wood he had left. As the flames grew, Lyra sat beside Cale and tried to warm his hands. She looked at Eli. Why are you helping us? Eli hesitated, staring into the fire. Because someone once helped me, he said quietly. When my world fell apart, a stranger gave me kindness. I never forgot that. Lyra's eyes softened. Then you have a good heart. Before Eli could answer, Cale's eyes fluttered open. He was shivering harder now. Lyra, it's cold, he murmured. Lyra began to cry softly, trying to hold him closer. Eli reached into his bag and pulled out his last thick coat. He wrapped it around the boy and said, No tears, little one. We'll keep you warm. As Cale drifted to sleep, Lyra suddenly looked toward the walls. The glowing letters were pulsing faster like a heartbeat. She stood and walked to the stone statue. When she placed her small blue hand on it, the air shimmered. A bright blue light filled the temple. Holographic shapes appeared. Images of alien scientists, children in cages, glowing weapons, and soldiers. Eli stepped back, stunned. What is this? Lyra's voice trembled. Our past. This is where my people were born. They made us in labs, soldiers without mercy. But my brother and I were different. We could feel. Eli looked at her in disbelief. They created you.
To fight?
She nodded slowly. Yes. We escaped before they could turn us into weapons. Eli stared at her for a long moment. He didn't see a weapon. He saw two frightened children trying to survive in a world that saw them as things. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder. You're not what they made you. You're free now. Suddenly, a sharp sound broke the silence, a mechanical hum outside. Eli rushed to the door and saw a small red light moving through the trees. Another drone, damn it, he muttered. They found us again. Lyra's eyes widened. They'll come soon. Eli grabbed his axe and kicked snow over the fire. We move now. He lifted Kyle in his arms, and the three of them ran into the night once more. The cold bit into their skin, but they didn't stop. Behind them, the drone followed, blinking red like a hunter's eye. As they crossed a frozen stream, Eli heard the first explosion in the distance. The soldiers were back, and this time they were close. He didn't look back. He only tightened his grip on the child in his arms and whispered, "Hold on, both of you. I won't let them take you." And as the snowstorm rose again, swallowing the forest in white chaos, three small figures disappeared into the dark woods. One man and two glowing alien children, running toward a fate none of them could yet imagine. The forest had turned into a frozen battlefield of silence and fear. Each breath that left Eli's mouth came out as white mist, vanishing quickly into the icy air. The snowstorm had returned, fierce, wild, and endless. Eli ran through the trees, Kale in his arms, while Lyra followed close behind. Her small feet sank deep into the snow, but she didn't slow down. The sound of mechanical engines echoed behind them. The soldiers were coming. Red beams of light cut through the fog like knives, scanning between the trees. The quiet forest was now alive with the hum of machines and the distant shouts of alien voices. Eli's heart pounded. He was only one man, armed with an axe and a will to protect. Yet behind him marched an army that would burn the forest to ashes if needed. They reached a fallen log and hid behind it. Eli placed Kale down gently. The boy's breathing was shallow, his skin pale and trembling. Lyra crouched beside her brother, whispering softly in their language. Her small hands glowed faintly blue as if trying to heal him, but the light faded quickly. She looked up at Eli, panic in her eyes. He's too weak. He needs warmth. Eli looked around. There was no firewood, no time. The soldiers' lights were getting closer. He unbuttoned his own coat and wrapped it around Kale tightly, ignoring the cold biting at his own skin. He whispered, "I promised I'd keep you safe." Suddenly, a sharp beam of red light swept over them. The drone above had spotted movement. "Run!" Eli shouted. They sprinted through the trees as the drone fired bursts of plasma that scorched the snow and bark. The blasts illuminated the woods in flashes of blue and red. Eli swung his axe as the drone swooped low, striking it hard. Sparks exploded, and the machine crashed into a tree, burning. But the damage was done. The soldiers now knew exactly where they were. Within minutes, the sound of heavy boots and metallic armor filled the air. "They're surrounding us," Lyra cried. Eli grabbed her hand. "There's a river ahead," he said, panting. "If we cross it, maybe we can lose them." They ran until the trees opened into a wide, frozen valley. A river stretched before them, covered in ice, glowing faintly under the moonlight. The current beneath was still alive, moving fast under the thin, frozen layer. Eli stepped carefully onto the ice, testing it with his boot. It cracked but held. "Slowly now," he said. "One at a time." Lyra helped Kale onto the ice first, but halfway across, the sound of engines grew louder. The hovercrafts appeared above the treetops, their spotlights cutting through the night. "Go!" Eli shouted. Lyra turned to run, but the ice gave a sudden, deep crack. Kale screamed as the surface split beneath him. In a heartbeat, he slipped into the freezing black water below. "Kyle!" Lyra cried out. Eli didn't think. He dropped his axe and jumped in after him. The icy water hit him like a wall of knives. He grabbed the boy's arm and pulled hard, kicking against the strong current. His body burned from the cold, but he didn't stop until he pushed Kale back onto the ice. Lyra reached out, pulling her brother to safety. "Please get up," she begged. Eli tried to climb up, but the ice cracked again, sending waves of freezing water over him. His hands shook as he struggled to hold on. Lyra leaned over and caught his arm. Her small hands glowed faintly, spreading warmth into his skin. "Don't let go," she said, her voice trembling. With one last effort, Eli pulled himself up, collapsing beside them, gasping for breath. The hovercrafts hovered above, lights flashing brighter now. Soldiers jumped out, landing heavily on the snow. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. "They're here," she whispered. Eli stood weakly, his clothes soaked and freezing. He looked around, searching for shelter. Then he saw a narrow cave hidden behind a curtain of icicles. "There," he said. "Inside, quick!" They ran, slipping through the frozen rocks just as the soldiers reached the riverbank. Plasma blasts tore through the snow behind them. Inside the cave, Eli used his last bit of strength to roll a heavy boulder against the entrance, blocking most of the view. The three huddled together near the back of the cave, trembling from cold and exhaustion. Eli's teeth chattered, but he forced a smile at Lyra and Kale. "We're safe. For now." Lyra pressed close to her brother, trying to warm him with her glowing hands. Kale's eyes opened weakly. "We'll be okay?" he asked in a faint voice. Eli nodded firmly. "Yes, kid. I'll make sure of it." Outside, the soldiers searched the valley, their lights sweeping across the snow. They found the broken drone, the footprints, the cracked ice, but no trace of life. Inside the cave, the small fire Lyra had made flickered softly, its light reflecting off the frozen walls. The warmth spread slowly. Eli leaned against the wall, watching the flames dance. "I've fought storms before," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. "But never one like this." Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes filled with a mix of fear and gratitude. "You fight like someone who has nothing left to lose," she said softly. Eli smiled weakly. "Maybe that's why I won't stop." Outside, the wind howled across the valley. The soldiers moved on, believing the prey was dead. But deep inside the frozen cave, three survivors huddled close together, bound by warmth, courage, and something far stronger than fear. Tomorrow would bring another chase. But for now, for one small moment, they were safe. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was worse. It was the silence before danger returned. Inside the cave, the fire had died down to faint embers. Eli Thorn sat awake, sharpening his axe once more. His hands were numb, his body weak from the freezing river, yet his eyes were steady. He knew they couldn't keep running. Lyra slept with her brother's head on her lap. Kale's breathing was shallow, his skin pale. The faint blue glow that usually shimmered across his skin was almost gone. It was as if the light of his life was fading. Eli looked at them and felt a tightness in his chest. In just a few days, these two children, these alien twins, had changed him. He had been a man with nothing left to lose. Now he had something to protect again. He reached out and touched Lyra's shoulder gently. She woke instantly, eyes wide with fear, until she saw it was him. "Rest's over," he said softly. "They'll find us by morning." Lyra blinked sleepily. "You can't fight them all." Eli smiled faintly. "I've fought worse odds before." She shook her head. "They are many. He'll die." He looked toward the cave entrance where pale light filtered through thin cracks in the rocks. "Then I'll die buying you time." Lyra's voice trembled. "Why?" "We are not your kind." Eli stood and checked his weapon, a small old rifle, its metal cold and heavy. "Doesn't matter," he said. "You're children, and no child deserves to be hunted." Outside in the distance, the deep hum of engines began again. The soldiers were coming back. Lyra's glowing eyes widened. "They found us." Eli moved quickly, gathering what little he had left, 2 bullets, 1 axe, and the last bit of firewood. He handed her the small flask of water. "Keep him alive. Don't come out no matter what you hear." Lyra grabbed his hand, her small blue fingers trembling. "You'll get killed." Eli smiled sadly. "Maybe, but they'll remember who stopped them." Then he turned and walked toward the mouth of the cave. The forest outside was ghostly quiet. Snow lay thick on the ground, marked only by the footprints of approaching soldiers. Eli stepped out, the cold wind biting at his face. His breath formed clouds in the air. He stood tall, an old man with an axe in one hand and a rifle in the other, waiting. Moments later, dark shapes appeared through the trees. 10 soldiers, their armor gleaming under the dull light, spread out in a line. The silver-eyed commander led them, his face calm and cruel. "There he is," the commander said. "The foolish human who shelters abominations." Eli raised his rifle. "Leave now," he said, his voice low but steady. "Or this snow will remember you." The soldiers laughed. "You think one man can stop us?" Eli fired once. The shot echoed through the valley. The front soldier fell. The laughter stopped. Then came the storm of fire. Blue plasma bolts shot from their rifles, burning through the trees and snow. Eli dove behind a fallen log, firing back with careful aim. Each shot was precise. 2 more soldiers dropped. When his rifle clicked empty, he rose with his axe. The snow exploded around him as he charged forward. Plasma burned past his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He swung his axe hard, shattering a soldier's visor. Another blow sent a second one to the ground. The commander sneered. Enough. He raised his arm, and a pulse blast struck Eli square in the chest, sending him crashing into the snow. Eli gasped, struggling to breathe. Pain spread through his ribs, but he pushed himself up on shaking arms. The commander approached slowly. "You could have lived, human," he said coldly. "But you chose death for their sake." Eli's eyes burned with defiance. "If that's death, I'll take it." The commander aimed his weapon at Eli's heart. But before he could fire, a strange vibration filled the air. The snow around them began to glow faintly blue. From the cave entrance, a bright light flared, soft at first, then blinding. The wind howled as if the world itself was waking. The soldiers turned in confusion. Out of the light stepped Lyra and Kale, their eyes glowing brighter than before. The markings on their skin pulsed like stars. The commander stepped back. "No," he hissed. "They were supposed to be incomplete." Lyra's voice was calm, but it echoed with power. "You made us weapons, but he made us human." She raised her hands, and the air shimmered. A wave of energy burst outward, blue and pure, knocking the soldiers off their feet. Their weapons fried, their armor sparked. The forest lit up as if the sky had fallen to earth. Eli shielded his eyes. When the light faded, the snow was quiet again. The soldiers lay unconscious, their machines silent. Lyra ran to Eli and dropped to her knees beside him. "Eli," she cried. "You're hurt." He smiled weakly. "You did good, kid." Kale placed his small glowing hands over Eli's wound. Light spread from his palms, warm and soothing. Eli felt the pain fade, replaced by a deep calm. The snow around them shimmered softly, and for the first time in years, Eli saw beauty in it. "You saved us," Lyra whispered. Eli shook his head slowly. "No, you saved yourselves." The children helped him stand. Behind them, the soldiers lay still, their weapons frozen in ice. The forest was quiet once more, but not empty. It felt alive. Eli looked at the 2 glowing twins and smiled faintly. "Guess it's over." Lyra looked up at the sky. "No, Eli, it's just beginning." And as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, the human and the alien children walked deeper into the forest, away from war, away from fear, and toward something new. Dawn finally broke over the frozen forest, painting the snow in soft gold and silver light. The storm had ended, but the silence that followed was heavy and deep, like the world itself was holding its breath. The wind carried the faint scent of smoke and burnt metal, the only signs left of the long night's battle. Eli Thorn stood weakly among the trees, his breath coming slow and heavy. His coat was torn, his hands bruised, but his eyes, those tired, human eyes, held something new. Hope. Beside him stood the 2 alien twins, Lyra and Kale. Their blue skin shimmered in the morning sun, their faint glow mixing with the light of day. They looked fragile and strong all at once, like the dawn itself had chosen to take their shape. Kyle was holding Eli's hand, his small fingers warm and glowing softly. "You're okay now," he said in his small voice. "No more hurting?" Eli smiled faintly. "I've had worse." Lyra looked around the clearing where the soldiers had fallen. The once fearsome machines were now silent, frozen under sheets of crystal ice. The commander lay still, his weapon shattered beside him. The twins had not killed them, they had simply stopped them. Frozen them in time, as if mercy itself had taken the shape of frost. Eli looked at the twins, amazed. "You could have destroyed them." "But you didn't," Lyra nodded slowly. "You taught us that power doesn't need hate to be strong." Eli lowered his head, humbled. He had once thought himself broken beyond repair. But somehow these 2 strange children had brought him back from the edge. For the first time in years, he felt alive. He looked at them. "What will you do now?" "They'll come again. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they won't stop." Lyra looked up at the sky where pale blue clouds drifted lazily. "Then we must keep moving. There are others like us, Eli, lost children. We must find them. Cale squeezed Eli's hand tighter. You'll come too, right? Eli hesitated. He had lived his whole life in silence and grief, hiding from the world. But now, standing with these two small beings who had shown him courage and kindness, he knew he could never go back to that lonely cabin. He smiled gently. Yeah, kid. I'll come. The wind blew softly, carrying snowflakes through the air. They sparkled in the sunlight like stars. The three of them began walking through the forest, leaving behind the ruins of battle. The snow crunched beneath their feet as they followed the faint blue markings carved long ago by Lyra's people, the path of the forgotten. As they walked, Lyra told Eli about their dreams. We used to dream about a place where no one would chase us, she said. A place where we could play in the light and feel the sun. Eli nodded quietly. Maybe we'll find that place. Maybe we'll build it ourselves. Cale giggled softly, a sound so pure it broke the cold silence. It had been too long since laughter had echoed in these woods. They crossed valleys and frozen rivers until the trees opened into a wide clearing. There, sunlight touched the snow like golden fire. In the center stood a small broken structure made of silver stone, another ruin of the old world. Lyra stopped. This is where our people were born, she whispered. This is where it can begin again. Eli looked at the ruin and nodded. Then we'll start here. He gathered wood and built a small fire. The flames rose warm and bright. The twins sat close to it, their glowing skin reflecting the orange light. For the first time, their glow wasn't a sign of fear. It was a sign of peace. Eli looked at them and said quietly, You know, when I first saw you two at my door, I thought it was a curse. But now I see it was a gift. Lyra smiled softly. You gave us warmth, Eli, not just fire. Heart warmth. He chuckled lightly, though his eyes glistened. Guess we saved each other. Kyle tilted his head. Then we're family now? Eli froze for a second, then nodded slowly. Yeah, family. The word felt heavy and warm on his tongue, like something sacred he hadn't spoken in years. As the day grew brighter, they sat together in silence, sharing the warmth of the fire. Above them, a flock of white birds flew across the sky, disappearing into the light. Far away in the cold cities of steel and glass, people would soon whisper of what had happened. They would tell stories about a lone human who faced an army to protect two alien children. Some would call it a myth. Others would call it a miracle. But deep in the forest, no one cared about stories. A man and two glowing children lived quietly under the open sky. They built a small shelter near the silver ruins. They grew their own food. They learned from each other, human and alien, side by side. On winter nights, when snow fell softly outside, Eli would sit by the fire and listen to Lyra sing in her strange, beautiful language. Cale would fall asleep against his shoulder, dreaming of stars and peace. And every morning as the sun rose over the endless white forest, Eli would whisper to himself, This is home. Because somewhere between loss and hope, between cold and warmth, between human and alien, he had found his heart again, and the snow that once brought death now carried life, shining quietly under the light of a new beginning.